I call to order the Gladstone City Council work session for August 28th, 2018. Tonight we're here to discuss the Two Rivers Co-op information, the City Council Covenant of Mutual Accountability provided by Councilor Michael Milch, code amendments for membrane structures, and the use of funds for business development and community promotions. We'll be discussing the establishment of a community grant program for the allocation of these funds. So since it's a work session, could everyone go around the table and state your name and that you're here? Jackie?
Jackie Vett, City Administrator.
Pat McMahon, City Council.
Linda Neese, City Council.
Matt Tracy, City Council.
Kim Ballard, Two Rivers Co-op.
Barbara Fryer, CASA of Oregon.
Kathy Brecker, Interim Finance Director.
Jim Wynot, Public Works Director.
Tom Mercero, Councilor.
Neil Reisner, City Council.
Michael Milch, City Council.
Tammy Stemple, Mayor. Could everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Oh, could you state your name too, please?
Melissa Ahrens, City Planning Department.
Thank you. So because this is a work session instead of a regular council session, instead of a regular council meeting, it's going to be informal. We do not have business from the audience, but instead we'll have an informal discussion with staff and council members. So I greatly appreciate everyone's help keeping the session productive, positive, and most importantly, to the point. So the first item is the Two Rivers Co-op discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. So we're going to have a conversation that continues a little bit off of what we had in executive session. And just to provide a little bit of history, in your council packet as Exhibit A, you have a request from Two Rivers Homeowners Cooperative asking if there might be any relief under the city's low-income utility assistance program that we might be able to provide them a reduction in their water and sewer rate increases. So first of all, the reason why we had the executive session is because when staff was meeting with the Two Rivers Homeowners Cooperative and CASA of Oregon, we were allowed to look at some permanent financing information that is exempt from public inspection because it has to relate to financial information that the cooperative is going to vote on as a whole in September. And so we were allowed an opportunity to look at what that long-term financing was. So we reviewed that information, and now in open conversation we want to discuss a little bit about the information here. So in your packet, you also have a letter from CASA that explains who is CASA of Oregon, and it talks about the Two Rivers project description and what they're going through right now to become a cooperative and what kind of permanent financing is going to take to make that happen. You also have a letter in your packet of a notice of fund availability reservation letter into regards to the financing for that cooperative. And then you have a second letter from Oregon Housing and Community Services that's dated April 17th. So when we got this original request in May asking whether or not there was utility assistance for low income, the city hadn't really been able to provide this because this cooperative is on a master meter, and we only offer our program to individual residential units in the city. So when we looked at this, our interim finance director pulled up some information in their utility account and realized that citywide we had not programmed in the correct utility rates. And I think all of you remember at our work session last month we had a utility billing discrepancy work session that talked to you about what happened and how we planned on doing a correction action plan. Part of that was sending letters to all of the affected multi-unit and apartment commercial accounts in regards to what the 9 months discrepancy came to. And we did send a letter to Two Rivers Co-op stating that their correction to the sewer portion of their utility bill equated to $13,564. But we didn't want to just send them a letter, and we told the council that we wanted to sit down with the board of Two Rivers Co-op and explain to them what the discrepancy was and to offer a 10-month utility monthly payment program to them. In those conversations, we came to realize that the Two Rivers Co-op is a state-certified affordable housing designated project. So the state has already certified them as an affordable housing project. The city has assistance available for low-income assistance, and we wanted to see if there was any way that we could take our existing program and allow some relief to them from the utility side. So I'm going to have Kathy go over this worksheet that all of you have, and this is a public document, to talk a little bit about how we're trying to allow Two Rivers to take advantage of the current program that the city has.
The city uses the federal HUD poverty guidelines for the qualification of their low income. Basically, a person cannot exceed 185% of the base amount for a household of 1 to 2 persons. It ranges between $22,452 to $30,444 per year. The guidelines that Two Rivers uses are different, but they are very, very similar, and they're also issued by HUD, but for affordable housing rather than poverty. We were able to get an apples-to-apples comparison off of those, and to summarize it, roughly 77% of the residents of the Two Rivers Co-op would qualify easily under the City of Gladstone's low-income eligibility guidelines and be eligible for a 50% reduction of a portion of their utility costs. So what we are proposing to do is use that percentage of 77% of the Two Rivers full billing. We take 77% of that based on what their qualification rate is at, and then apply the 50% discount to the net amount of the billing. We felt that this was a way to give parity between the two, between the city and how Two Rivers is qualifying their people. And then Two Rivers would be responsible for annually certifying back to us that their their residents are staying at least 77% or actually above the 60% state guideline of 185% of the federal poverty guideline. If they fell below the 77%, we would reduce the amount of the base that we're qualifying. If it went above 77%, we would increase it. If it fell below 60% at any time, then we would discontinue the program.
Any questions?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit, what is the reduction for each, for the water, it's only on the base
Yes.
meter charge, it's not on the consumption.
Correct. Exactly.
What about on the sewer
The
side?
sewer would be 50%, the stormwater would be 50%.
50% of the usage of the sewer or the base fee?
It's based on the 142 EDUs, so it's the total amount of sewer that they would be charged. Say it's X amount dollars, we would take that total sewer charge, reduce it by 77%, or reduce it down to 77%, and then 50% of that would be a reduction to them.
Okay.
Same percentage on storm, same percentage on the base water rate, which is only $118 for the meter charge. Their consumption, they would pay the full charge on the water consumption. And that is the same basis that a resident within the City of Gladstone receives their low-income assistance on, but there, of course, is on the full 100%. It's not reduced to the 77%.
Do you have two numbers? If we were to start this today, do you have two numbers in September that if we weren't doing it, this would be what they would pay on an average month, and then what it would be with the reduction?
I've done it based on a yearly average.
Uh-huh.
I've worked those up. Their average billing over the past 12 months was roughly $10,526. Needless to say, winter and summer varies tremendously.
Uh-huh.
The discount that would be applied would be roughly $26.56 per month. Over a year, the revenue abatement to the city would be roughly $32,000.
Which would be spread across all of the utilities, and then probably in the future warrants a bigger discussion regarding policy around the program that we currently provide. But what we're trying to show you is that there is a way that we could offer the same type of low income assistance to the cooperative without creating a new program, that this is the existing program that the city already has, and that we wouldn't be allowing them to collect on 100% of it. It would only be at the percentage of what they are, 77% this year. Next year, if it's only 68% of them that are certified for that, then we would offer 68% of them the 50% reduction. So that's what we're recommending as a way that we can help provide assistance. And again, it's only because the state has certified them as an affordable housing project in the city of Gladstone. And if we get concurrence from the council that you're fine with our administrative approach to that, because we're not creating new policy or creating a new program, our recommendation was that we also reduce that discrepancy amount, 77% of that, by 50% as well. So instead of them owing the $13,564, it would reduce it by about $5,000 to do that if we offered them the same reduction retroactively back to the date that we had the utility billing discrepancy.
Again, it's a program we already have in place.
Correct.
I have a question. So in reading through the paperwork, it says that you are required to retain affordability. One place it says for 20 years, and another place it says 60 years. So which of those two numbers is it? Is it different grants, or have the different requirements?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is 60%, or 60 years is required of the grant, and the tax credits are required to be 20 years.
Okay.
Because the tax credits only last 20 years.
Okay, so that was the difference. So my question is, with a lot of changes in the city, staff and council, how available is this program going to be in the future? Is this something that we can commit to now for, you know, the 20 years or 60 years, or is this something that we're going to have to relook at constantly?
I would not recommend that the city commit to this for more than a year-to-year basis, because I think that it's onerous onto the cooperative to provide certification to us that they remain an affordable housing project. I do think that in the next year or two that the city council may want to put on their strategic plan that they revisit this low-income assistance program, because obviously we're subsidizing it. Mm-hmm. It's a loss of revenue to the city, but we've chosen to provide this program to those that have access and have been certified to it. But I have a public works director here that will tell you in the next few years that money's going to have to come either in a rate increase or some other way. And so I would caution against the city committing to more than a year-to-year commitment on this.
So how does that affect your financing?
It doesn't affect their financing, because everything that we've seen in executive sessions shows that they are sustainable with what they're currently going after.
Okay.
As is, yes.
So I have a question about where, what conditions our infrastructure is surrounding this property. Do we have a fairly solid infrastructure around this property, or
No. I mean, our city just doesn't have very good infrastructure. I'd have to look specifically at that River Road, for example, out front.
Right.
The infrastructure on site is privately owned,
Right.
so it's not city's infrastructure.
But they do have money in their financing, considerable amount of money to deal with the infrastructure.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I just am curious because, I mean, this is where they're tying in, are they not? I mean, we've got water services.
Where they're tied in now.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm
Yeah.
curious about, like, what the impacts are for that region in that area
Right.
and close proximity to that. I'm not pushing back on it. I
Right.
just want to know.
Right.
I think that's a question we should probably answer in talking about this.
Right.
So.
Right.
Any more questions?
Curiosity, if they, each unit was individually metered, which 77% of them would fall under the low-cost assistance
Mhm.
program?
From what we see,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Councilor Milch.
Not everyone who qualifies for that program applies for it. Here we are applying that discount effectively to 100% of the people who we feel qualify for it. You may have neighbors who qualify for it who don't ask for that help, but in this case, we are applying it to all units.
It is available though if somebody does qualifying.
Right.
Councilor Mercero.
For clarification, what we've talked about already, for clarification, the 23% that are above the low income levels will pay a higher utility fee based on a percentage that you've established that is trying to even it out so it is in fact.
The park will pay a higher utility fee based on that 23% that do not qualify. They will not receive as much of a discount as they would if everybody qualified. But because there are 23% of the homeowners within the park, the overall bill that the park will pay will be higher. It's a master meter, so we can't specify to the individual homeowners.
Okay.
We're charging the park, but we are reducing their discount by those number of people that are over the income level.
So the individuals will pay the same thing.
I personally don't know how the park bills their individuals for their utilities, if it's included in the space rent or how it is.
It is.
So we're not getting involved in that. All we can deal with is that master meter account.
But Two Rivers will be paying the city the amount based on whether people are low income and or high above income.
They are going to be paying the city a little bit more than they would if everybody within the park was qualified as low income. We're not going to extend the discount 100%, only 77%.
Okay, let me ask this question in a different way.
Yeah.
Councilor Mercero, can I offer a suggestion as but also somebody that is only one person in a mobile home is only going to use so much water. The neighbor next to him who has two people and his grandchild is going to use 2.5 times as much, but they still get billed the same amount because they just take the total and divide it by the 142 spaces. They cannot, there's no other way to decide you're using more water because they have no way to know. That's the same thing with the percentages there.
Okay, I understand that. But the question is, okay, if we had 139 residences in Gladstone, okay, of the same sizes and proportions, okay, would the city be getting the same amount of money for low income as well as the high income?
If people applied for low income,
Correct.
we would be getting less money for those people.
Okay. And it would be equivalent to this.
Yep. It would be equivalent to this, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions?
You're not taking comments?
No, it's not public testimony. So, what you want from us is a consensus on whether you want to move forward with this, and then a stipulation that this is going to be looked at and reevaluated on an annual basis. So there's
Yes.
no long-term commitment to this.
That's correct. And
Okay.
I think it's a generous offer. I also think it's creative because we've heard a lot of conversation in the community about them being pushed out of their homes, and what we wanted to display to you today is that we've seen the financial information and what they are getting in their permanent financing is financially sustainable for where they are. They've requested to the city to be considered under the current low-income assistance program, and we're saying here's one way that we can make that work so that we're treating everybody equal, and that we would offer it to the percentage of which is qualified as low income, which is 77%, and that each year it'd be on them to certify to the city that they still meet the same criteria to receive that benefit. Yes.
Councilor Tracy.
Do we have any other properties in the city that may fall under this master meter situation, or?
No, and the only reason, like we stated earlier, is because this is a state-certified affordable housing unit project. So if an apartment complex came to us, and if they could prove, I guess, that they were state-certified affordable housing project, then they could fall under this as well. But from our understanding, this is the only project in Gladstone.
Well,
in the state.
wouldn't that be on an individual basis for an apartment that has single metering for all of the units? I mean, so that would be somebody who's, it's a separate entity. I'm just trying to figure out if we have anything else like this, if this is unique to the city, or if there's another one or two or three of these kinds of.
So is there, he's asking, is there, like Tri-Cities, are they on a single meter, or are they individually metered for whatever the next mobile home park is down the road?
Right, no, it's set up the same, it's got a master meter, so, yeah.
So that could effectively, I think that's the question he's asking.
Yeah, that's exactly
They
the
went
question
through
I'm
the same
asking.
process and got certified with at least 60% and basically the same year-long process.
Right,
Yeah,
but I'm
they
not-
we'd be in the same.
Correct me if I'm wrong, City Administrator Bass. I mean, I know that this, as part of the fund availability and part of the loan process and what the cooperative has done to go forward in financing the cooperative, that would be a separate issue than us basically making a decision based on income level, would it not? So if somebody applies for assistance, it doesn't necessarily have to be under the auspices of a financial statement like this, where there's a loan involved in a affordable housing project. I'm asking as a question.
No, there could be another mobile home park that at some point qualified for as a affordable housing place that wasn't looking to borrow money or anything to retain that, and we could conceivably have a similar policy with them. But as Administrator Betts was saying, this is the only project or apartment or any kind of multiple family setting that qualifies as an affordable housing project with the state. So that's why this is the only one we're looking at it to do it with right now.
And I guess my question again is, if it's about 60 to 80% on the AMI, that's the qualifier that I saw. I didn't see that it was necessarily predicated on whether or not they had an affordable housing recognition from the state of Oregon, or.
That's what started our conversations, because our initial answer to them was, no, we can't provide you assistance because you're master metered, and we'd be setting a precedent. In our conversations with CASA and understanding that this is designated as an affordable housing project through the state certification process, that is the only reason why we are considering this.
Okay.
Councilor Milch.
Would it be helpful to hear from people who are attending tonight's meeting who have other information regarding mobile home parks and their background? And I know we're not making are we taking formal action tonight or approving staff action?
you emphasized informality of the process, and I want to be sure we're not leaving people out who came here to get questions answered.
In a work session, no decisions are made, a consensus is gathered, and we coming to council saying this is what staff intends to do, unless a majority of you are saying no, that's not what we want to do, that's is what we intend to do.
So then it wouldn't come back to us later?
That's correct, because this is already a program that the city has.
Right.
So no individual would need to come to the city council to qualify for the program.
Right.
We're just telling you that this is the research we've done. We spend a lot of time on this, and it's okay if you tell us no, but we think this was one option that we vetted very carefully to bring to you in a way that we could provide assistance to this co-op that is trying to get long-term funding to remain in the community.
And remain affordable.
And remain affordable.
Any other questions? So, I'm going to ask if you agree with staff moving forward, and this would be evaluated on an annual basis. Councilor Mercero.
I haven't made a decision yet.
Okay, Councilor Reisner. Yes. Councilor Milch.
Yeah, I like the numbers, how they worked it out. It seems
Councilor
equitable.
McMahon.
Yes.
Councilor Neese.
Yes.
Councilor Tracy.
Yes.
And I say yes. Have you made a decision yet, or are you just going to hold off?
Sounds like it's pretty unanimous, so I'll support it.
Okay.
I just wanted, as a statement, I just want to make sure it's consistent with the citizens of Gladstone.
Right, it's already being applied. What, 6 households now
6 households currently.
qualify for this? So, and it's the same formula,
That have
same.
applied. There may be more people that are eligible, but they have not applied.
Okay. All right. So is that all you need from us on that one?
Could I ask for one more thing? Can we scenario build a little bit on any other existing parks that might have qualifying residents in the park, just to get an idea, so it doesn't mean that we're out there soliciting the information necessarily to make a change, but I think we should probably be ready if somebody comes in and asks.
Sure. Follow up on that.
I mean, there's a lot of gotchas that happen in this city.
Well,
in my
Barbara, do you
experience.
know of any other in the city of
I'd
Gladstone?
like to be able to offset a few of them if we can.
I'm not aware of any other parks that have acquired the park, any residents that
Right.
acquired the park. In terms of affordability, I don't know of any other parks that have been certified by the state.
But I believe
then
our program is not specific about parks. Our program is specific about individuals and their income level, is it not?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right.
So if you have aggregate numbers of individuals at a park and they have one master meter, I'm assuming that that group of individuals could put together their own cooperative, and regardless of whether or not they're financing to buy the park, they can at least come to us and petition for the discounts, could they not?
That's very viable, yes.
That's what I'm asking, is that we just look at that and see if we have the ability to address it. So I'm sorry for cutting you off.
That's okay.
Thanks.
And I support that thought.
Thank you.
Being fair with the rest of the citizens.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
All right, is that it on this topic? We're good? The next one is the City Council Covenant of Mutual Accountability provided by Councilor Michael Milch.
Back in September, we had a training session with the council. It was during a period of time we were, some of us were new to the council. Some of us had been dealing with some pressure from citizens about the circumstances under which we came to be on the council and other issues. And as a result, we kind of concluded our meeting understanding the importance of being supportive of one another, helping each other through good times and bad as a city council. And so back in April or May, when some issues started coming up again, that we're testing our ability to kind of abide by that agreement that we had among us, I gave some thought to putting together what I'm calling a covenant of mutual accountability, which sort of gives some more specifics to what it means to be, to have each other's backs, to be supportive. It's more, not so much city business as council business. And I shared it with you at the retreat we had recently, and asked that it be brought here tonight for us to maybe talk about it a little bit. It was something I wasn't really thinking of it being adopted as action by the council as much as an agreement that we would come to together as a council and individually sign if we felt we could. And so I'd like to answer any questions or hear any comments and see what your feelings are about proceeding with something like this, particularly in the light of the fact that this is an election year. A few months down the line, we may have some of the chairs may be occupied by different people than they're occupied by now, and it'd be nice to have the continuity of, some attitudes, some agreement to mutual support. Clearly, this doesn't intend to say that we will agree with each other on every issue that comes before us. That would be asking too much. But the way that we treat one another publicly and privately is what this is really focused on.
Discussion. Anybody have any questions for Councilor Milch? Where did you find this? Did you write it?
I kind of reworked it from something that had been developed in a different situation completely, where there were some conflict going on among staff members in another setting, and they determined that this was something that they needed to kind of develop to prevent that from happening another time. I try to emphasize affirmation of some of the positive roles that we play in the community outside our serving as council. I thought of, Councilor McMahon serving meals and Councilor Neese active in the issues of mental health, people volunteering in schools and other places, and wanting to affirm that we can play other roles in the community besides our council roles, and that we need the time and the respect from one another to be able to do that. And a lot of it has to do with how we have complaints about each other, going to the source rather than spreading gossip or doing something else, handling them in a less effective way.
Any questions? I like the concept, but I would like it to be simpler. I'm one of those 5 words to a sentence kind of bullet point person, and
I appreciate what you've done, and I thank you for it, and you've put a lot of time and effort into this. Me, personally, I would not sign it at this time, and I would like to wait until after the election is over.
Michael, I like it a lot. I think it's just kind of like, just reminds us about how we should work together in any kind of setting. I think it's kind of a guidebook to adulthood to a certain degree. I mean, just be fair about it. I don't know if it's something to adopt, like at the moment. I think it's something to remind us going forward, and I think it's something that we can look at and go back to and remind each other potentially about the fact that it's out there. I'm learning. It takes a while, right? A year of personalities, we all get used to it, but then to Linda's point, maybe until we all see where the dust settles, it might not be something to adapt and adopt. So I'll take it in advisement, definitely. I think it's a good piece of work. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Mercer?
I believe the intent is great. Councilor Milch, if I wrote it, it'd probably have more words in it. Even though I try to cut them out. But I think the intent is there and the basic belief is there. But I have a hard time at this time, because I don't know who the players will be in the future. To sign it now, it's just a bit early for me.
Councilor Reisner?
I can't really say anything different than what's already been said. But thank you for your efforts and work on that.
Councilor McMahon?
Whether the players change or not makes no difference. I have to disagree a little bit. It shouldn't matter what we think is going to happen in the future, no matter when the players change, which they will, obviously. Shouldn't affect whether this goes or not. So I'd be happy to sign it now, but only for 4 months.
I like it, but like I said, shorter words, sentences, and I think the concept's great.
All right.
All right.
Well, thank you all for reviewing it.
All right. So the next item is code amendments, membrane structures.
Yeah, and Melissa, you can come join us down here by Councilor Mercero.
But don't be under a vent.
It's cold. I tried to turn it off, so.
Feels great.
Yeah, it's warm.
I think right here's a good spot. There's no vent.
Thank you.
My nose is cold. You've got shorts on? Oh my God, I'd freeze to death.
Have you met everybody here?
It's been at least 6 months, I think, but yes. Nice to see you all again.
All right, staff, go ahead.
So we had a planning commission meeting where we discussed potential code changes that had come about. As I understand it, wasn't part of the process, but a lot of public input and meetings, commentary that the police department and specifically our code enforcement specialist, Sean, had worked with a lot and had a lot of public forum to kind of get together these draft recommendations. So that went forward to the Planning Commission initially. I think it was back in February or March. Wish I had written out a timeline for you, but it was quite a while ago. And then most recently, after working through kind of a violation letter template and other kind of enforcement tools, we focused in on updates necessary for temporary structures and how they would be enforced. That was one of the kind of highlighted nuisance issues within the city. Specifically, you know, the easy up tents with a lot of storage materials under them that sit there for quite a long time. Not, as the Planning Commission wanted clarified at the last hearing, the kind of temporary uses, such as when you're repairing your car and it's raining and you put one up, or someone has a lemonade stand and they're out there selling something. So we kind of worked through what is a membrane structure, what should we define it as, and then is it temporary, is it permanent, where can it be placed on the property if it can be placed there permanently. So in the end, the recommendation that they came to, and you can read it in the minutes, and it's kind of bulleted here in red in the memo that staff prepared, is to include a definition of membrane structures, and specifically membrane structures or fabric covered storage area, not temporary structures. And that definition doesn't include greenhouses, or, you know, when you cover something with a tarp to keep it protected. So trying to really narrow down what a membrane structure is, to not include kind of normal uses that aren't creating a nuisance, and is something the community has addressed as a problem that would need addressed in the code update. So we have that suggested definition here and underline of what a membrane structure is. And then that's important because it's how the rest of the suggested edits would apply. They all reference membranes or fabric covered storage area, so that's kind of the template and explanation of what is regulated with the suggested edit.
Sorry, I didn't mine at home, but I did read through it. I like the changes.
Okay.
Thanks.
So what we've recommended, and this was kind of a clarifying matter at the Planning Commission meeting, is that the city would allow membrane structures permanently on a property as long as they met the setbacks of the underlying zoning district. So in the residential areas where based on public feedback and kind of police and enforcement information from just driving around, all the photos they provided and kind of had as a presentation. Seems like this is the biggest nuisance in residential zoning districts. So in those areas you could have a membrane or fabric covered storage area pursuant to the definition of what that is, as long as it was set back to the same requirements as any other, garage or accessory structure on the property. So it wouldn't be, allowed in the front setback area on a property or right up against somebody else's fence, kind of spilling over a fence line or something like that. It would need to follow a setback. They added, the membrane or fabric covered storage area would be located behind the front building line of the primary structure. So it wouldn't be allowed to be in front of the house or directly in front of the garage, kind of creating a visual or aesthetically potential issue with the storage that was occurring underneath, or whatever the use was under the membrane structure. And then B was, we had a lot of discussion about that. That's where we had kind of the current activities exceptions included. So just general day-to-day things where you might actually really need a membrane structure for current uses. And we included examples such as gardening, temporary mechanical repair, temporary storage, and other similar activities to kind of give discretion to the planning department and code enforcement if there are temporary activities going on that aren't really a nuisance, they're just a temporary use for no more than 10 days, that they're not a enforcement matter and that they're okay within the code. And then we included C so that there wasn't kind of this legal non-conforming right to any fabric covered storage areas that were there before the code date. It was just, it's going to be applicable before or after the code's adopted. So Sean could go out and retroactively apply it to membrane structures or fabric covered storage areas that are a current nuisance, that are a current problem today. And then there was also concern that the membrane structures wouldn't be secured properly or could be potentially erected to create a nuisance by being not tied down properly in a storm event or something like that. So I forget which planning commissioner recommended that, but it was any membrane structure will be secured per manufacturer's instructions for proper anchoring for safety and other nuisance reasons.
That sounds like a Malachi.
Yes,
Malachi.
Yes,
all over it.
Yes, that was who it was. So kind of the circulating leftover items that Planning Commission didn't really come to an agreement on or full consensus that they thought would be best kind of discussed by you and looked at a little more carefully is how metal buildings and other types of temporary structures should be included in this definition. Should it be more inclusive to include, we get a lot of calls and planning staff about metal kind of carports that aren't necessarily a building. They don't need a building permit. So they wouldn't really otherwise be called a structure and need to meet setbacks. There's kind of a gray area. Should those be included as part of the definition and need to meet the underlying setbacks of that zoning district? Or do we want to kind of continue to let them just occur as a temporary structure that's really there as more of a permanent nature in the city? Is that really a nuisance that rises to the level of needing to be addressed in this code update? And then kind of timing of do we want to allow membrane structures and fabric storage areas to be permanent on the property? Is there some time limit that they should rather be permitted on? Should there be a temporary permit for allowing them on the property? Kind of that whole concept was discussed also between planning commissioners. So kind of how far should you take this? How far should this go in terms of what you're regulating?
All right. Questions?
You mentioned about Sean Boyle enforcing this, but as far as please correct me if I'm wrong, the Chapter 17 hasn't been under the police preview forever. So is that going to change?
So So technically, the city contracts out planning services to the county, but they retain their own enforcement, and Sean is the enforcement officer. He enforces zoning, Title 17 as well, so he has been
Since when?
regularly, I'm not sure of the history of...
A gray area.
Because I say, you know,
Yeah,
I mean, I would say, land use violations and that kind of, or
Mm-hmm.
building stuff hasn't been enforced here since, Jonathan left.
The county said the city's supposed to do it, and the city said the county's supposed to
Right.
do it, and that was the argument that we've had.
Right, and that's
or
why I'm asking.
heartburn.
and I think one of the
15 years.
improvements that we're trying to do with our compliance officer is to get him back into doing that enforcement. So that's the improvement piece that
Mhm.
we're proposing in here under 1798-010 enforcement measures, is that would fall onto our city compliance officer. So you're correct, it's not something that we've done in the past, but we should be doing it, yes.
We've been actively coordinating with Sean too. I talk to him probably on a weekly or bi-weekly basis about land use and zoning violations to give feedback or answer questions. So we work together in the context of interpretation of what the zoning code is. So he's not kind of out there all on his own.
So, speaking of Sean, his argument has been that he was never trained for code enforcement. So is that something that we're going to provide him, is classes or training of some sort? So he can do this?
I haven't heard that from him before, so I would have to follow up on that.
I remember that, hearing that.
Yes.
It's been 2 or 3 years ago now, when there was reviews being considered.
I tend to agree, but I would also say that we're getting into the weeds there. If that's something we want done, we need to tell Jackie to take care of it and let her deal with it appropriately versus us picking on somebody that is a third level down below us. Because you have Sean who reports to the chief who reports to Jackie. So I guess I agree with most of the statements, but I think we're getting a little too far down into, if we want that done, I think we have city staff take care of it. This should be our direction, not pick on Sean or what he does or has not done in the past.
And that's correct.
Yeah, my point was just that we haven't been doing this,
Yes.
so do we have the staff to really do the enforcement?
Or get the staff trained
to do it
accordingly to do it, yes. And I can follow up with the police chief on that.
Part of the work that we've been doing and the communication we've been getting, however, is to help fix the code so it could be enforced. And I think after months now, it seems to be the opinion that it's been fixed so it can be enforced. So my belief is it needs to be dealt with.
And I think a lot of the code that we have changed, though, is not in the building code. It's been in the other realm of...
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right.
But none of it's getting fixed until now, I hope.
Yes, Councilor Milch.
But as part of B of this, we are saying that the last sentence of that first bold paragraph, the proposed amendments would make Title 17 violation procedures more consistent with enforcement procedures for all other municipal code violations and improve code congruity. So that's where we are attempting to address the issue that Councilor Reisner raised. We will specifically say that our code enforcement officer is the one with the authority to enforce these.
Correct, and the procedures would be consistent with what we do with other municipal code violations, so it wouldn't be kind of two separate methods, and we're laying out more specifics in here for how to do that for zoning violations, so it's clearer and more streamlined of a process.
Okay, so we need to have a discussion on metal structures.
They probably should be the same as the membrane because they can fall into disrepair. They're more expensive. I think they're more permanent. The one I had, probably illegally before I built a huge garage, they're driven into the ground. I mean, they're pretty permanent. So I would say we probably need to look at them being the same as the fabric structures as far as how we rule with them.
Do you want to get a consensus
Yeah,
on
it
that?
doesn't make sense to do them separate. Council Tracy?
So I have a question. If I was to come in to talk to our planner, and I was more apt to do so because it's a metal structure, what are you, I'm sorry, Melissa, put you on the spot, but what are you going to tell me if I come into you and say, I'd like to build my semi-legal structure on the front of my house? What are you going to tell me with regards to code requirements, et cetera, for metal?
For a metal structure?
Correct, yeah.
So it would depend on the zoning district
Mhm.
and your setbacks, but I'd look first at the residential zoning district, assuming it's in front of a house. Usually there's a 20-foot setback
Okay.
for carports. So if it could easily be classified as a carport, then it's much simpler. Oftentimes people say, well, it's just a temporary, storage area that I may or may not put my car under, and it gets really unclear. If a building permit's required, then that's also an easy kind of threshold, because then I can kind of say, well, it's a building permit, so there's a structure, so it needs to meet the setback.
Mhm.
But if there's no building permit, it's not easily recognizable as a carport, and it can kind of be couched and explained in a reasonable way as a temporary structure that could be removed, then we don't have a lot of ability in the code to prohibit that the way it's written right now.
Okay. So more apt, though, that somebody would come in and maybe talk to you about a metal structure as opposed to the membrane structure?
No one calls and asks if they can put a membrane structure up or not.
So that's why I'm thinking there's a possibility we should discern between the two. I just feel like one seems to be like such a reach from the other.
Right.
That's why I'm asking.
And that's why we had talked a lot about just saying temporary structures and having that be the title of the definition,
Right.
and including metal structures in with membrane structures and other temporary
Because then
type
that would
structures.
potentially get them calling you more often and talking to you about the membrane structures and the other structures.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
Council Mercer?
I'm good with that.
Council Reisner?
Yeah, I'd have to see the wording, but I like the thought.
Council Mills?
I've read other language that described, recreational vehicle storage, so it talked about, it was defined more in terms of what was underneath it rather than what it was made of on the outside, but it tried to get at the same issue. But then you're not regulating those people who use it to put all the junk that doesn't fit in their garage either. So, you got to choose which one is going to be the most adequate. But if somehow we could expand the definition of membrane structures to include metal structures and apply the same setback rules, then I think it would broaden it and help with some of the deficiency that's there now in the code.
We got Councilor McMahon.
Sorry, I've got a question afterwards. I apologize.
So what's the difference between a carport and this metal structure then, I guess, seems like you brought up the word carport.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure if there's a definition of that in the code.
Okay, does a carport have to be like maybe attached to the house, or can a carport be freestanding wood structure?
So if it's attached, if it's over 30 inches, then it's easy because it has to meet the same setback. If it's detached, that's when the gray area kind of begins. If they call and say, I want to build a carport and it's made of metal, then it's easier for me to make a determination. But if they say, I want to build a storage area made out of a metal structure or material that I might want to put my car under also, and it's going to be temporary, it's been that hasn't happened yet to me, but Clay has mentioned that happened to him quite a few times, and I've had people call in with very strange structures they're proposing in the front yard. Storage container, kind of repurposed, and other, gray area type temporary structures that don't necessarily need a building permit and could be removed at any time, but they don't need to meet the setback per the code right now. So it's very unclear. And I don't think it's been applied consistently, so.
Okay.
Councilor Neese?
I'm okay with it.
Councilor Tracy?
Yeah.
Councilor Reisner had a question. Or furrowed eyebrows.
No, I'm
You're
good.
good?
Yes.
All right, so I guess the consensus is then to move forward with it and
Put
come up
metal
with-
buildings in with the membrane
membrane
structure.
structure.
Okay.
So is this something that we can vote on at the next meeting?
Yes, because when we're done talking about this, I'm going to gauge you on timing of having a public hearing so that we can receive public input on this.
Okay.
Yeah.
For clarification, though, are we talking about putting it together as a package so that we know that we're talking about these structures all together across the line, so that I would see if we can stimulate some folks to at least pay some more attention to coming to you and to the city and asking a little bit about how to do this the correct way, so we don't get a lot of folks in trouble.
Actually, now, you were talking about, temporary structures where people have been, storing things. Well, my understanding is we currently have ordinances forbidding that. I mean, that's even what the chief has told me. We sat down with him and the lieutenant several months ago and talked about that.
Okay.
So just to throw that out there, I guess.
Now we're going to have it changed and cleaned up and ready to be enforced.
Sorry, just to clarify, did you want to change the name of the definition to be temporary structures, or do you want to leave it as membrane or fabric covered storage
Temporary
area?
structures makes more sense. That's more inclusive of.
Or temporary storage structures, is that a little broader?
Well, how temporary are they?
Well, and that's what I was going to ask. So what's temporary? Is there a timeline? I mean,
10 days.
Not on a
10 days?
foundation
And what?
And it can only be used twice a year.
Something that can be fairly easily removed.
10 days is about the temporary standard that we've been using in here.
Right, and that was some of the discussion at the Planning Commission meeting too, is if we're explaining that they're temporary structures and defining them as that, do we want to permit them as permanent at all, or is there some time limit? So that was some question that was brought up. I think that's on in here too.
Wasn't it addressed in language?
The second bullet point on discussion item, possibility of permits and or time limits on membrane structures.
So you're saying these membrane structures would only be good for 10 days?
It's a question. Does the city want to regulate it that far, or if they're in the backyard areas, they meet the setbacks. They're not really a nuisance. It doesn't, might not have the same effect. So, is it okay that they're allowed in the front yard area, not consistent with the setbacks for a 10-day period, but otherwise they can permanently be permitted?
A temporary structure. Permanently be temporary.
Yeah.
But that, we got in the weeds a little bit there. Yeah.
Well, I think, yes, I think that makes sense, that anything that's not in compliance with the standard setbacks for that zone could be temporary, considered temporary for 10 days. If it abides by our setbacks, then it could be more permanent.
So you could have a membrane or fabric covered storage area there permanently if it's met the setbacks. Okay. Or metal, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, if it meets the setbacks, it can be there as a permanent structure. But temporarily, if you're doing like lemonade and it's raining.
Garage sale, and you want to
Right.
huge garage sale with the.
Do people do lemonade anymore?
Yeah,
No,
actually.
because you have to have a business license.
No, there was two ladies down here on Dartmouth between here and the next block over that was doing that week before last. It was delicious. It's Simsica.
All right, so are we all good with this one? Can we move on to the next one?
No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so when would you like this to come back to council for a public hearing? I mean, we could do it September 11th.
Our agenda looks for September 11th.
It's full, but that's good because it means we're getting a lot of things done. But that would mean that we'd need to modify our staff report by next Wednesday if you feel that's enough time for people in the public to comment, or we go till October 9th.
Yeah.
Okay.
That way we
Fine.
get in a newsletter and that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right, the next item
Thank
is
you, Melissa.
use of funds for business development, community promotion, establish a community grant program.
Okay, so this item has a pretty comprehensive staff report in it, and I've been working on it for several months. Because one thing I think you're learning about me is I'm I'm very careful on how I'm spending the public's money. And as you can see from the staff report, back in 2016, the council approved a resolution formalizing the allocation of revenue collected for business licenses and fees. So, without going into a lot of detail, because I know you have this information, we've been collecting business license and fees and putting them in a line item, but we never decided, either the council at that time or concurrent councils has never really decided how do we want to spend those funds. And so I have been very frugal. I have spent maybe $3,000 of those dollars in the last couple of years, which is nominal in my opinion. And I think that it's time, now that we're truing up our budget and audit, to have a conversation about how you feel that these funds should be spent. And I should also say that it's okay not to spend funds. Just because you have the money doesn't mean you have to spend it. I think you have to be very strategic and have a plan in place before you spend it. So what I did in your packet is I provided you history on the resolution that was adopted. And as you know, we also have gone through a very public process this year on business licenses and what we're charging for those, and do we want to amend them. And the council just came to a conclusion at their last meeting that in January we're going to change our business license fees for home occupation, and then we're going to provide we decided to do a credit for those that you guys talked about from previous years, 2017 and on, I believe. If they asked for a credit for $50, that we would do that. So we are projecting that in the coming year, based on the decisions that you just made, that our revenue will probably decrease by about $40,000. Okay, so really what we're wanting to talk to you about is, I've got two specific things that I would like to spend money on, and one of them is within my spending authority, but I wanted to make sure that I have the buy-in. And I also understand that we have an election coming up, and the dynamics could change on how this money is being spent. So I would like to get your high-level feedback on what you would like to do with the money that we have. They're currently available is about $230,000 in there for expenditures. I've attached in here, and I introduced John Southgate is in the back there.
Oh.
Hi John, thank you for coming. John, I have been updating all of you in my weekly reports, and I know that Councilor Neese and Councilor Tracy and I met with him, and he has a lot of experience in marrying communities with the government sector and the private sector. And I've provided you a little bit of his resume in here, and quite honestly, it's a very small contract that I would like to enter into with him to explore further on what our next step should be for the Gladstone Downtown Revitalization Plan. We do not have an economic development department in the city here, and Melissa is just contract planning services. We have a very unique opportunity in Gladstone with the new library here of potentially attracting a private developer that may want to help us trigger a new project either in the downtown area, or I know there's various businesses on Portland Avenue that owners may be interested in selling. And I would like to have John help me work through this phase here of what our immediate next steps should be for the downtown revitalization plan. And I put the proposal in here, and I think that it's very specific to show you what his tasks and deliverables would be for approximately the next 8 weeks, and it would cost, $6,000 to do that. I would like to get head nods that you guys are okay with me proceeding on that next phase, because I think it's going to involve all of you and stakeholders in the community, and I think it's very good likelihood that John could help us do a private-public development in the downtown area. So that's one option that I put in here, but that only spends $6,000 of the rest $236 that you have. Now, out of this first look that John does, he's going to come back with us with some suggestions on future phases that we may need. Like, do we need to have money set aside to help with incentives if a potential developer wanted to come down here, and of such. The other option that I've put in here with you is that I would like to start a community grant program beginning in the next fiscal year, and I've kind of laid out a draft program in your packet for you to look at so that I can get some feedback on whether or not, yes, you think it's a great program, we should try it for the next fiscal year, or maybe not, the city's not ready to do that. To do a program like this correctly, there needs to be good oversight, and I'm guessing that I'm going to have to be that oversight because, again, we don't have the staff that like cities have when it comes to economic development. So I just want to be cognizant that there could be me coming back and saying, I think we need to increase the percentage from our business license revenue that goes into this to help with the administrative costs. I think it's an excellent opportunity to try to get some of those nonprofit organizations that need money to do their great festivals or projects in the community to apply for funding that is a formalized process that also has criteria, and they have to report back to us on how they spend that money. And so I think this would be a very good pilot project for Gladstone to start in the next biennial. So those are the two high-level items that I have. The council could choose to change the resolution to say that money should just go in the general fund to help offset general fund services. Typically, that's what a lot of cities do when they collect a fee for business licenses. So the options are minty, but I want to get a feel for how you guys feel that we should be spending this money, and I guess I'll let that conversation start there.
I have a question for the two counselors that were part of this original resolution. Pat, were you on? You weren't on council then. You were,
yes, I was.
You were. Three counselors. So did you guys have an idea of what you wanted to do with the business license money, or did you just want to stock it away?
I wouldn't say stock it away. We wanted to use it back into the business community.
Okay, so that was your intent.
Yes.
Right. Because it was just going into the general fund.
Okay, so
and
your intent was to make sure that it was earmarked for business development
business
or economic
Yes,
or, right.
no, it was earmarked. We did not want it to go into the general fund.
Okay, but you didn't actually go beyond that?
No.
Okay, but your intent was to?
Yes.
Okay.
And remember, I've solicited for about 6 months for people in the city to be part of a committee, and nobody applied. And that's why I'm coming back to you. And my guess is that we probably are going to have to hire somebody to help us with a strategic marketing plan. But I did want to make sure you knew that we vetted this in the community, and nobody was interested in being on a committee.
Which is crazy, because they all like to complain about it, but, I mean, I get it.
Is the possibility of partnershiping with, like, Oregon City, Westland, Milwaukee, the county?
For their economic development?
Kind of stuff? Yeah.
Well, and I guess that's the kind of direction that I'm looking for you. You mean like hiring a staff person to help with economic development, or when you say partnering, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure really either. I'm just thinking that, rather than us trying to go on it ourselves. I mean, like, the county has their Mount Hood territory.
Correct.
Campaign.
And that falls under tourism.
Yeah.
Under the county.
Oh, okay, so that's a tourism side versus business.
Right.
Right, and we don't have a chamber in Gladstone.
Right.
Do we have one?
Okay.
But also I'm thinking too is just across the river, there's a lot of economic development going with what's going on around the lagoon, and also on the other side of the freeway. I mean, you got Costco is still talking about trying to move in there, and downtown Oregon City, Main Street. I know I'm talking to Oregon City quite a bit, but I think it might be helpful for us to, we're in this area together, and or venture north too.
I agree with you, Councilor Reisner, but I think one thing I see about Gladstone is that we're very unique in our. I mean, there's a level of uniqueness that if we were to bring somebody on, we'll continue the conversation about Mr. Southgate, but somebody needs to be able to really look at that downtown area and be able to see that vision, aside from what Mayor Holliday's vision is for the dump.
Yeah.
The landfill, which is
not an Oregon City lens,
which is fine.
But
I'm not discounting what you're.
I mean, I've talked to Costco people myself.
Yeah, I'm not discounting what you're saying. I mean, I think there's a certain uniqueness, and I think the mayor would agree. We're looking at that bridge. We're looking at the interlinks. We're looking at all those things, and the fact is that this is an incredibly unique downtown area with a lot of potential. Mm-hmm. And maybe it is worth at least dipping our toes and half of our foot into the water. Do you not agree? And then
jump in with both
right.
feet.
Yeah.
Like
and you're right, and having somebody that is looking out for our interests.
Yeah, I'm afraid of the competing priorities.
Yeah,
to be honest.
absolutely.
You're
and that's what you would
right.
get.
Yeah.
Yes. Councilor Milch.
I'm excited too about the letter from John Southgate. I think having served on the Downtown Revitalization Committee for a year, it's one of those things where the comment you hear most often is, well, we're going to come up with a big report and then it's going to be put on a shelf and we'll forget about it. And I think going like this at least makes sure that we keep that in front of us. And I think similar to the transient lodging tax, where we have some requirements as to how we use that, I think if we discipline ourselves to putting the money to certain purposes, it's going to stimulate that kind of creativity and forward thinking that we need to have to make some of these improvements possible, and even to have some overlapping things. So while that deals with something that promotes tourism, what we do in downtown might also help to promote tourism if it's part of an overall plan. And so between the funds coming from those two sources, Gladstone generated money will help Gladstone to generate more money and more public life and all the other things that can make us a healthy, prosperous city. So I like this. I can see the possibility that if we have a grant program, it may require more administration, so we may need to up that 6% figure to something else. But that's another good thing, because if we can kind of determine the appropriate amount of administrative money, then we can say, this is the grant fund over here, and 100% of this money is going to be funding those grants. The administration is already taken care of over here. The grant money will fund the grants, and that's putting that money to good use in a variety of ways, whether it's, we've talked about things like improving the storefront looks, the facades of the building, trying to get more uniformity of a theme, all those kinds of things, and what we can do to promote our parks, our river, the unique, again, getting back to those unique characteristics of our city. So I'm glad you brought this to us, and I'm glad that you have the authority to engage Mr. Southgate, because I think that's a good use of our funds.
So anybody else? So can we do this in two separate questions? First the Southgate piece, and then the grant piece?
Yes, and then I would like to offer one more piece, but if I'm hearing correctly, that I know my ability and John's ability, that it may be out of this first phase, he's able to tell us how we should be leveraging the rest of these funds that we have here, and that's kind of what I would like to do, is if the council would authorize me to work with John on that. So that's one piece.
And then put the grant separate, not look at it right now?
I would like direction for the council for as we go in, because I would like to allow at least $50,000 to go into a community pilot project for the next fiscal year, but that means that we do applications beginning in January.
Okay.
And I would bring this program back for council to formally adopt in the next month or two.
Okay.
So I would like to do that.
Both. Okay. So we'll do those as separate questions.
Well, and I especially like your idea of using the budget committee, which meets around April, May, to be the committee to help decide on some of those grants too.
Yeah.
That's a good use of personnel, and you don't have to drag new people in to do it.
All right, so I guess the first question is, how do you feel about the Southgate piece? Councilor Mercero, everybody's got thumbs up.
I support the idea.
Okay, Councilor Reisner said yes, Councilor Milch said yes, Councilor McMahon said yes, Councilor Neese said yes.
I'm good. Just, my question is whether or not the city administrator feels that the scope of work is what you want to, as a scope of work, or if you'll amend it or change it or do anything.
I think I can amend it more to include some more assistance with helping us identify strategy for how the funds should be spent outside of the $50,000 for the community grant program.
And I would assume then John lists a number of different folks, developers, potential developers he would talk to. I would assume that we would get reports about their feelings on this, and as he encapsulates that and it comes forward to us, then we'd be able to have a document that...
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm good.
so we're good to go on that one. The next one is the community grant program. How do you feel about that? Yes. Councilor Milch, yes. Councilor McMahon, yes.
I'm good.
Councilor Tracy, yes. Councilor Neese, yes. Councilor Mercero.
Yes.
Councilor Reisner. Okay, so we're good to go on that one too.
Okay, and I just have one thought here, and if you would like more time to think about it, you can. You have a meeting coming up with the school board, and I asked for an update on where they are with the Gladstone Pantry Coordinator. They have created a food pantry coordination duty list, and they are looking for $75,000 for a 3-year budget, and they're 40% there. And they were looking for a $10,000 a year for 3-year to help fund the coordinator position for 3 years. If the council wanted to contribute to that, you have money available out of this $230,000 that's readily available, or you could have them apply next year in the grant program for funds for the food pantry.
Councilor Tracy.
So I have a thought here. So it would seem to me that if you put together a grant program, this community grant program, that you might earmark some in a more of a community enhancement grant program type earmark, like the food pantry, and then the other monies could maybe be earmarked for the business development or for business innovation. Maybe it's a 70-30 split, maybe it's a 50-50 split, but that way it feels like if somebody's going to compete for the community enhancement grant type monies for food pantry, they know that money is there, they know they're going to be able to compete against the other competitors for that money.
And then the businesses know that there's some money there that's
exactly.
specifically for them.
Exactly.
And I like what he has said, because I think that's really important, that we set X amount of dollars and then have others, because we just don't want to say, oh, we're going to give all of this.
Right.
So
And I mean, we can give them seed money to help them, but then they need to figure out how they're going to raise money and be able to stand alone.
Which is what they had presented to us, I think, at one point in time anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the criteria in this program that we're proposing is that it provides assistance for essential utilities, food, clothing, or shelter. So that it would qualify under here. And then the only other two real quick is because these are ones that historically that have come before City Council at the last moment, and I want you to grandfather them in, is the Gladstone Fire Department Association at Christmas time and the Gladstone High School graduation. And I don't want to be in a position where you have to wait them a full year to provide them assistance that you do on an annual basis. So if you wanted to grandfather them in this allocation, because that's going to come up in the next few months, or you could wait again until next June.
So the fire department wants 500, is that what they've asked for?
That's what they have asked for in the past.
Yes. And then the school party is how much?
It's 500. 500 also.
So I think grandfathering those two in for 500 is reasonable.
Remove some of the awkwardness of having them
Yes.
come before us each time, and one or two council members being opposed to it, and that leaves a a bad feeling.
I kind of like them coming to us every year. So I honestly do like them coming.
I think they can still. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't
We
turn
can
them
earmark it.
away.
Yeah,
let's earmark it in
Yes,
advance.
yes, we'll be magnanimous and give it to
I think they
you.
should come every year just to give us a report of what they have done the previous year and what the money's gonna be spent
That's
for.
fair.
I think it's a,
Well, I think in our grant program, we do have a requirement that they keep us updated.
yes, in the grant.
This is an excellent program because they have to do a report back on how the funds were spent. And so, for me, I think we do 50,000, and then, if we need to increase it in the following years, that's great, but
Yeah, those two that we're grandfathering in, I think that they should still have to,
Next year do it.
next
right?
Yeah,
year they will.
okay.
But you've got Christmas coming up
Right,
for
okay.
this one.
And in the,
All right.
and in the spring, next, for,
Yes.
2019.
okay, so then
Yeah.
the grant program, we're all good to go, thumbs up on that one.
And can I ask about one more thing? Just before I was about to leave for this meeting, a guy knocked on my door from an economically cautious pest control company soliciting business. And I asked him for a card, and I thought, well, I can just look him up because if he's coming to my door, he must be licensed to do business in Gladstone, so he's on the list of licensed businesses here in Gladstone. And then I thought, is there such a list? Do we publish any kind of a directory that's available to the public to say these are the licensed businesses doing business, and it's even sorted like a local Yellow Pages or something, you know,
We can
if you
do
remember that concept.
It's a public document.
Right,
yeah.
but it's also a requirement that they're supposed to carry a copy of the
Of the
business
Well,
license
yeah,
with them.
I probably was getting scammed,
right,
but,
so I got hand
but the
in
point
I'll
is,
talk to you afterwards. I'll
one,
tell you a
one
story
one
or two about that.
expenditure regarding these funds might be to let the licensing of businesses be a service to the community, because we can say, these are the folks who have taken the trouble to license their businesses in our city. Please use them rather than ones who aren't licensed.
That could be something just on the face, not a Facebook
On the
page, but
website.
Yeah, we
website or
can,
Yeah.
yeah, some cities do that. I think for us, it's just getting it up there and do that, but we can make that available.
Or do what I do is when they knock on the door, I ask to see their business license. And when they don't have it, I say, well, when you get it, it's down at the second stop sign, take a left. Next one is the city hall in the corner.
And the police station's right next to that if you don't make it and continue to solicit.
Right. Well, I've done that too.
Okay, so.
The only exception is, which I was really surprised, landscaping is done through Metro, actually. They have a Metro-wide business license. And I found out...
A lot of contractors were that way too.
Some of, you're right, yeah.
So that they can buy a Metro-wide.
Yeah.
Right, and we get some kind of
Get a little bit of money,
money back.
not much.
Yeah.
All right, so there's one thing that wasn't on our agenda, but it's kind of pressing as far as time goes, so I'm bringing it to you right now. I've been meeting with some other mayors in the region about the Metro Affordable Housing Bond that's coming up in November. And I've been staunchly against it because I felt that we were going to get no benefit, but we were going to have to pay into this affordable housing bond, which is going to average between $60 to $100 a year per household. Thinking that we were going to get zero benefit out of it. Well, my meeting with Mayor Gamba of Milwaukee last week, he's kind of changed my mind a little bit and opened my eyes that yes, we actually could benefit from it. It could help us with maybe some redevelopment on Portland Avenue where we could bring in some affordable housing aspects. We do have some spots where we could put it in. Clackamas County is going to get about $128 million, and some of that could come our way. So I'm not going to sell you on it, but I'm going to give you a copy of their resolution, which they would like us to look at and see if we would be willing to adopt something similar, or if any of you would like to endorse it personally, here's the paperwork for that. So you don't need to make the decision right now. I just wanted to give you the paperwork, and then we can decide what we want to do with it.
Mayor,
Yes.
if we were to adopt a resolution just prior to the election, and somehow word got out in the public that we were endorsing it by resolution, it's not something that has to be done by a certain date
No.
and included in a voter pamphlet or anything like
No,
that.
but just because the election's in November is something that we
Okay.
should probably start
So
thinking about.
whatever position we take, pro or con, we're not under a strict time limit as far as that goes. This I
Counselor
know
Tracy.
there are some limits.
Yeah.
How do we want to, I mean, you're talking about a personal endorsement, Mayor. Do we want to do a personal endorsement, or do we want to sit as a council on whole on this? And
That's
secondly, following up on your comment, I did touch base with Andy Shaw today, and basically confronted him with our dilemma, and that I know that you've talked to Mayor Gamba, but and said, you know, this is where we sit. This is where, as a city, not we.
Right.
But this is as a city. This is what our constituents feel. I've had conversations with them. I need something. I need
Right.
something that doesn't look like a developer and builder giveaway.
Yes.
And I need to be able to take something back to them to make them to allow them to understand comprehensively what this really is to them and what it would mean for the region.
Mm-hmm.
I get things said to me like, well, they should consider the region. Well, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful idea. I believe in that as well, but not everybody should consider the region, and we know that Gladstone being landlocked and with it where we are, you know, our folks think more locally here, and I'm glad that they do. So anyway, I'm going to try to get some more information. I'll be glad to share it. But do we want to go out individually? I guess that's a question for all of us. Do we want to go out individually and endorse, or should we get as much information as we can and decide to do so if we want to as a council?
So I'm sure you all will start receiving phone calls and emails.
Okay.
I would say to take a moment and read some of this and then let me know your desire. And if I've got a majority of you saying you want to endorse it, then I'll put it on an agenda.
Okay. You know, like you and I talked about, this is okay, that's great. We definitely need affordable housing, but this is for a 5-year fix. This isn't something that's going to immediately increase our affordable housing stock. This is building affordable housing.
Right.
Where we feel that we need something more immediate. We need
Right.
some other options that fit our model better.
And we're stressed because we don't have the land inventory.
That's right.
So we're kind of in a
So-
position, so.
And I
Yeah.
don't think West Lynn is supporting it or taking a stand because they don't have
They don't want affordable housing
the
in West
inventory
Lynn.
there, so.
Right, they don't.
Really.
Do we
In
know
a
where Oregon
nutshell.
City is on it?
Oh, they're supporting it 100%.
They are?
Yeah,
Okay.
and Mayor Gamba is very much.
Do you know about Canby? Are they?
I don't think that they wouldn't
They're outside
they
the-
wouldn't get any of the funding.
Happy
No.
Valley,
Okay.
no.
Happy,
Yeah.
no, Happy Valley won't.
I'll get some information if I can if Andy gets me some information, I'll pass on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, so that was my promise, and I brought it to you guys, and there we go. All right, do we have any other things to talk about? Adjourn?
So moved.
Meeting adjourned at 7:55 PM.